Military sexual trauma can affect people of all backgrounds, regardless of their age, race, gender identity, or sexual orientation. No matter how long it's been since the experience, you can get compassionate care from VA to support your healing. Learn about the many care options designed to help military sexual trauma survivors. To get started, call your local VA facility and ask to speak with your MST coordinator.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. I'm Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hoobazoo Network. You can find out more on hoobazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes, Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, all veteran-owned businesses, Sipper Savage, Bottom Gun Coffee, and Caisson Shaving Company. And I'm really excited for this one, folks, because I've talked to a lot of artists over, in my, time of doing Oscar Mike Radio. But I've never talked to a veteran comic book artist. Gunny Wolf with his Simper Tunes is kind of like the first comic book strip guy I talked to. But this gentleman, Stephen, is the first guy who's actually done like a comic book series. Stephen, welcome to Oscar Mike Radio.
Hey, Travis, it's good to be here.
Awesome, man. Awesome. We got connected through social media and you told me about your project and we started talking, figuring this out. Before we get into the it's all good stuff, but the really good stuff, tell me a little bit about your military story, if you would, please.
Yes, sir. So, just like my life, it's kind of all over the place. I enlisted in the Army, back in 2004 right after, the invasion of Iraq, and starting before the Iraq surge picked up. My first duty station was in Korea, and then from there I went to Fort Hood and then straight deployed to Iraq on one of those infamous long 15-month deployments.
Right.
Yeah. And that was during the peak of the surge in some of the craziest areas. We were in the Diyala province, in Bakuba, and I was an infantry machine gunner in a mechanized unit, getting at it. We lost 13 guys on that deployment, and I ended up getting shot. I don't know how many other people got injured, but it was a pretty significant event. And then from there, I was young and I was like, I'm done with the Army. I don't want any part of this anymore. That was too much of a culture shock for me, I guess. And so I got out and I was in the National Guard, at the advisement of one of my NCOs. He's like, well, at least stay in the National Guard and see what goes on. And so I did I think it was a 12-month stint in the National Guard. And after that, just seeing life how it was, and going through the recession, the 2008 housing crash,
right.
and all that other stuff, I was like, oh man, maybe I should look at going back in. And so it took quite some time, but by 2012 I was back in another active duty deal. I tried out for Special Forces. I got a 19-day non-select, but I made it my 19 days. And then, I was over in the 173rd Airborne in Italy, and I finished out my time at Bliss. So I've got a good 10 years behind me, and it was a rocky road, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
You wouldn't trade it for anything. You had some varied experiences, and so you're doing all this, and you do comic books. Before we get into comic books, what was it like when you said, okay, I'm done for real this time. I want to get back into a different path of life. How was that transition like for you, Stephen?
That was actually a really interesting transition. So towards the end of my my 10 years, I knew that my time was going to be up. I got injured a lot in the 173rd. I was looking at, you know, medical issues and starting to, you know, performance was starting to go down and like that. And I was like, all right, I need to, you know, look at transitioning into civilian life. And it was actually one of the privates in my unit that was under me who was an artist, and he was out there just like painting and sketching. And that's something that I always did when I was a young kid and younger man. Even in Iraq, anytime we had like a few minutes, I'm sitting down there like scribbling something or doodling this or that. I had like a combat monkey that I drew with chalk on my gunner's shield, you know, and all this other kind of stuff. You know, I was that guy, and I realized I had let a piece of myself go, you know, for the military. You know, you kind of have to give up some things, and especially once you become an NCO, your focus kind of like, you know, goes away from yourself and it's on your soldiers and the guys around you. And when I saw that, it kind of like reconnected a piece of who I was, and I was like, you know what, I need to feed that. I need to go back to that. And so it took a while, and I had to relearn some of the things that I did when I, you know, I was a kid, and you know, going through all that. And I think it was a good like year and a half process of just going back to basics, just drawing, sketching every single day. Even though I was working in the oil field, you know, we get 15 minutes, I start you know, scribbling on my notepad and all that. And then moved into digital, and that was even worse. You have to teach yourself everything from the ground up on that.
So it's really different when you go from like doing, you know, analog paper and pen or paper and pencil
Oh
and
yeah.
brush to digital. It's that big of a jump.
Yeah,
Oh
because
wow,
you,
okay.
yeah, you know, when you're scribbling stuff on a paper, you know, and your hand is literally moving across, just the very weight of friction between your hand and you know, going across the paper is different on a computer. And then the computer is seeing your work differently. You know, you have to focus on different factors and say, oh, my line art has to be like this, and I have to do this way, because if I try to do this effect, it's not going to work the way I want it to. So yeah, there was a large gap to overcome there, and it just took putting in that time every single day, and I'm still doing it. You know, it's lifelong learner.
Lifelong. So you learn something with everything you draw.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you're doing all this. Where was Tales of Nihilism? So we're here, folks, with Stephen Russel, Army veteran, and he, you know, does comic books, not comic strips, not a meme, but an actual like story. And you know, we're talking about his newest project, Tales of Nihilism, through Global Comix. You know, I wouldn't even know where to begin to get a comic idea into a publisher nowadays. So let's just start with the beginning. Where does
Nihilism.
nihilism
Yeah.
come
Sorry.
from? And you know, the character, you know, Philip Maxwell Kirshner. I thought that was a very interesting name. I don't know if there's any significance behind that, but you know, where did it start?
So it's really funny. I'm I've always been a storyteller as well. That's one of the things that, you know, transitioned well from the military. You always have an audience, you a group of guys out in the field with nothing to do. Storytelling is essential, you know. And I translated those skills into this, and this was born out of me and my wife. We were just playing a video game, the Batman Arkham Asylum, you know, video game,
Yeah.
and we just happened to make like a passing comment like, where's OSHA in this world? Like you know, the standards of this like building in this town, and there's no city inspector. Like, who's getting away with this? And it was just a joke, but at that point, like, I locked onto it and I said, wait a minute. I'm the kind of person that I love telling absurd stories. I love pointing out the absurdities in life. And this is one of those things. We all, you know, if you really love comics, then you're all about these characters. These characters are in this, perfectly built world, and the superhero is going to come in and save the day and fight the villain, and yeah, there's going to be some stuff going back and forth, and that story arc there, but no one ever focuses on the world that exists and the people around them and what that would actually look like and how difficult that would actually be to live in. And so I decided to take it to the absurdity with this. And then you're thinking about, okay, every time a superhero comes in and smashes somebody's car, that's an insurance payment, and how many premiums are gonna rise until you can't even afford to own a car anymore just because this is going on. So yeah, I just took it that way and started going with it. And then eventually I had a guy, Joseph Pittman. He's my co-writer. He jumped on and he started helping me with dialogue, and that allowed me to take more of the art direction and move in there. But he's full on board, and we're just taking it to that absurd level.
Well, it wasn't really absurd. So folks, I'll have the link to the Global Comics website where you can check out Stephen's work. And I'm reading it, and two things struck me. I'm like, this is Fallen Down, that movie with Michael Douglas with a twist. And throw in a dash of The Watchmen, where superheroes aren't all these flowery characters. And I'm like, yeah, here's this poor guy, Philip, Maxwell Kirshner, going to work, and his car gets destroyed. He gets almost beat up, and his boss is just not hearing it, and he's got relationship issues. And it's like, in a way, I can't really identify with like Superman or Firestorm, very easily. But
Hmm.
I could identify with that dude. Was that
Yeah,
kind of like your intent?
exactly. And uh, you know art, you have to pull from lived experiences, and a lot of veterans like myself go through things like that. My first time out of the military, I'm a 23-year-old kid who had just been a team leader in one of the worst military combat engagements uh, of the decade. You're talking Bakuba and all that, and I go out into the workforce, and I'm not seen as a serious person. I'm seen as a 23-year-old kid with a high school degree, you know. And so you start hitting those experiences. You're working in a warehouse and you're just another guy, or you're maybe you're behind the fry line. And yesterday, you just got off a tour in Iraq and you were smoking guys down range, and now you have to be like, hey, do you want fries with that? Like, those kind of experiences, I draw upon those feelings to express, like what you're talking about, Philip Kirshner, and like, this is your everyman, and this does relate to society at large as well.
No, I said nihilism. You said nihilism, but to
Hmm.
define for folks what that philosophical, term embodies.
So nihilism started at the turn of the century, in the 1900s. And nihilism was a philosophy, as far as I remember, that comes out of a reaction to people losing religion. So you had Nietzsche, who came out and said, like, God is dead and things like that. And so from there, the thinkers and philosophers of the day, they had to come up with, okay, well, what is humanity's purpose? If we're not going to be a culture or people that follow some sort of religion or have some purpose behind religion, what are we going to do? And nihilism just says, there is no purpose, and you have to make your own purpose. And from there, other existentialism and all kinds of other things come out of that.
Well, I mean, in a way, he is definitely Philip as we go through his, life at that time. You know, not only was he having problems at the time of the story and when you first read the first couple of pages of the comic book, you could also tell you kind of let the reader know that hey, it's not been a smooth road for him,
Hmm.
over the course of his life, especially in his relationship.
Yeah.
And that as a veteran too, I can understand that because a lot of us, whether you serve in combat or not, invariably, if you serve long enough, you're going to experience loss of some kind, somebody you serve with, or personally, right?
Hmm.
And you're going to have problems. You're going to have people that you just do not get along with. And I felt that came off, really, really well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So technically, you say yourself, yeah, I have this concept. I have this guy, I have this story I want to start getting down on. We're going to call it paper for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
or ink pad or digital pad, or use a Wacom tablet by any chance?
No, I use a Microsoft Surface Go 2, and then I just have an application that goes in with that.
I drilled over that thing in the Microsoft store. It was sweet.
Yeah.
But some artists I know use the Wacom tablet. So you're sitting in front of your tablet. You have the idea in your mind. But one thing I've always kind of curious about with like the you know, Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld, right?
Hmm.
How does it go from here to your fingers and come out? Does that make any sense?
Yeah. And most of the time, what's in your head doesn't come. There's a lot in your head that doesn't come out on the page. You
Okay.
know, the way I see it is there's a whirlwind of stuff constantly going through my head, and so I have to try to like get out as much as possible and then critique it from there and curtail it, because not everything that's right in your head right now is the best idea. So it just takes some discipline, and putting that as like a priority. So what I do is typically once a day, you know uh, if I can get to it, even more, twice a day, I'll do sketches, just pencil to paper. Even if it's like, hey, I'm checking emails at work and I'm just going to scribble something down and do that, and just, it's kind of like the military, like you're doing those drills, over and over and over again. And so when these ideas come to you, you have that practiced muscle memory, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm thinking of this guy, I want him to look this way, or I'm thinking of this woman, I want them to look this way. Then okay, now I'm going to start drawing that down on paper. Some people, they have even crazier methods. They're doing these character, sheets and all this other stuff. For me, I just try to keep it as loose as possible. And then once I have that out, now I have a picture of somebody. Now I make up a story about them. Who is this person? What do they do? How do they relate to this and that? And, that's, those points are like, when you're going through these creative processes, what's important is to write things down, or if you're not in a place where you can write them down, take voice notes so that you can go back and write them down. Because a lot of people have creative ideas, they just don't have necessarily like the work processes to put them together. And it's like, okay, it's great to have stories, it's great to have these ideas, but if you want to put the fuel behind it, you need those work processes, you need to write it down, you have to have that, like, drawing background.
So this isn't just something that you wake up one day, say, "Hey, I want to start drawing," and do. You have committed a good portion of your life to doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And when looking into it, like I said, I've always been that guy who who will sketch, doodle, and do all those things. So to me, it's kind of like a natural deal. I'm sitting here receiving op orders from my commander in the morning, and I'm drawing like a little picture on the side of my op order, you know. So like it's just a part of who I am, and I make time for that.
Now, one thing I didn't really understand, and maybe this is, maybe it's going to answer itself, but I didn't see anywhere where you went to like an art school. It seems like you were largely self-taught and you figured out your own style by doing it simply.
Yes. So some people, you need that education. If things don't come to you naturally, if this is something that you would want to do but you don't know how to, art school is going to be good for you. But for me, I've if I've ever had free time, I'm doing art. So I'm teaching myself, like, okay, this is how this looks like when you do this on the page. And I've picked up books, uh, when I was a kid. The first book I got out of the library was Stan Lee's How to Draw a Superhero. you know and I'm like, oh, okay, learning from that, and here's how you do the circle and the blocks, and here's how you make a body, and all these principles behind it. And I think I checked that book out, like rechecked it out for like 6 months straight and just kept going back to the library until they were just like, just take it. I was in Mississippi at the time. They're just like, just take this book, like, it's yours.
Leo Salone, don't.
Yeah.
Well, it's the reason I wanted to really dig into that is a lot of
Mhm.
people, regardless if it's art or a business venture or just you know putting together an IKEA thing, won't do it because they won't do it.
Yeah.
And you just got to a point where you're like, I'm going to figure out a way to get this done. So you're kind of embodying that whole concept of imperfect action now versus perfect action later.
Yeah,
Is that kind of how you do this?
absolutely. And we're getting into a world where that kind of needs to be the modus operandi of everybody, because I I went to college for business management. you know when I went in there, nothing that I learned in business management school prepared me to be a business manager. None of that set me up to you know do anything that I do in my job or other jobs that I've worked on a daily basis. you know so even with the college degree behind it, you're still not going to learn how to actually perform a task. So if you want to do something, whether it be athletic or artistic or this, any sort of skill, you putting in the work and just learning how to do it on your own time, making mistakes, and then figuring out how to do it better, that's a huge part of the process.
Yeah. Well, part of the process is building this character, Philip, Kirshner. What can you tell me about Philip? I mean, because based on what you said to me and reading, the first two, parts of this project, is there's a lot to him, and I have
Hmm.
to feel that you took a lot of time not only to draw him, but you know quite a lot. You know quite a lot about him.
Yeah. And Philip is supposed to represent, your average dude. He is just another guy. If you were to look in a crowd of people, you would not be able to pick him out and be like, that's Phil right there. He's just, number 12 guy on the street. And like you said, I think I gravitated towards the idea of like, nobody can relate with Superman or Batman or, this guy or that guy. The things that they do are unobtainable for most people. But how do you relate to somebody that lives in that world? And that's something that you don't see in comic books. And I want to tell those more, you know, not necessarily like serious, but have a deeper meaning behind these books. And not just have some fantastic thing where it's like, okay, I've got to read like 30 Superman books to figure out what's going on here, and I've got to be in the world and do this. No, I'm going at this at more of a literature angle. I want this to have a story arc, and there's plot devices in here and metaphors and all that going on. And so, like you said, yeah, Philip, he represents your average guy. And it, to this first series, it's focusing more on these like golden age comic heroes, these guys who look like the first superheroes that came out, of DC and Marvel comics, and it's trying to like upend their stories because we put these characters culturally on a pedestal. Superman is like the most well-known comic uh, persona in the world. You
Yeah.
can go to China, you can go to Russia, you can go anywhere, and they know who Superman is if you show them a Superman symbol. And so he's got that embodiment of that idea. And what I'm trying to do is break those down and be like, those themes and these things about this character I don't think are true. And so we need to reevaluate it and look at it from the everyman situation.
Well, that was the thing, right? I mean, I don't want to give it all away because you have to go to Global Comics, you have to look
Hmm.
up the title and check it out. But you know, I'll come at this a different direction. I'm thinking
Hmm.
of like the Godzilla movies or some of these Japanese, like I'm a big the Big O robot
Hmm.
series.
Yeah.
Where entire skyscrapers are getting destroyed, entire downtowns wiped out, and it's like, okay, they go back to the little fortress of solitude, everything's okay. I'm like, well, no, wait a
Yeah.
minute, there's an entire city blocks devastated. How do they go to work the next day? Who's paying
Yeah.
that? And
Yeah.
why aren't there lawsuits coming for these guys, right?
Yeah. Of course.
And so I'm like, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, huh, you really didn't think about that because it was just he's going to do what he has to do, and that's just a matter of course. um
Hmm.
One thing that kind of struck me about Philip is there's a lot of guys out there in real life who truly go through their life. They get through college, they have get married, have a couple kids, and then about anywhere from 4 to 8 years after that, you can see where they kind of like they don't matter. They've accepted they don't really matter. They're just going through the motions, doing what they have to do, and no
Hmm.
one could care about them.
Yeah.
Did- I say that because falling down, right?
Hmm.
But I really kind of connected with that because I talked to some guys, and they're like, hey, I've got my wife, kids, I got my job, but it's like I could disappear tomorrow and no one really care. Do you think that's a larger problem in society, or is that just guys whining, complaining?
I think that's a natural thing that men go through. You know, even even Elvis Presley, after being the king of rock and roll and just nailing it in stadiums and being one of the best known musicians in our history. Towards the end before he died, he's in there saying, I don't think I've done enough. You know, there's this need to be you know great. There's this need to push yourself. And even as a especially as an artist, I'm like, yeah, I want whatever I do to supersede me, to last beyond me. That's how you make your mark on the world. So that calling is natural, I think, in people.
I just don't want to give it away, folks. I don't want to go to Global Comics and check out the series. Okay.
Hmm.
I gotta control myself here.
It's all good. And I that what you're talking about, I am playing on these ideas,
Yeah.
and that's, to me, that's what makes this a different comic. You know, you don't you don't go through these issues in a Superman or a Spider-Man comic. This is about them fighting a villain and doing this and doing that, but they don't have to have this type of emotional tie-in, and they don't have to represent something in society, and they don't have to go through these problems. you know we don't have a Superman comic where Superman comes down and stops civil rights abuses, and or stops the Vietnam War and says, hey, I'm Superman, I'm going to save humanity like this. So yeah, I want these kind of questions, and I want these kind of ideas coming out in this comic to set it apart from others.
Yeah, that's why I liked it, Stephen. I read it. And I'm like, okay, I've read a lot of comics. You know, I got like a closet full of them that I just can't get rid of. Big Sandman, Hellblazer guy.
Heck
Um,
yeah.
DC all the way. But this was different. This was different. So my next thing, I'm going through this, and I'm looking at the Global Comics website, and my next thing is like, okay, you're an artist, and you think you have a concept that not only you really like, but maybe some of your friends like. How do you go from what you created to getting on a platform like Global Comics? Because I'm poking around there, I'm like, okay, these kind of remind me of the titles I read growing up, where
Hmm.
the Marvel and DC would let writers and artists really push the boundaries. It doesn't seem to be that way anymore, just in my view. But
Yeah.
but it kind of struck a nerve. How did the relationship with you and Global Comics come to be?
So with the internet, of course, we're all connected more than we've ever been connected before. If you wanted to do this, uh, even when I got out of Iraq in 2008, you're talking, you have to draw this on paper, go approach a publisher. That takes time, it takes money, it takes having to hopefully get your stuff seen out of a junk mail basket and all that other kind of stuff. Today everything's at your fingertips, and me and my co-writer, we just looked around and we're like, okay, well, what's out there for people to read on comic sites, because we tried it on Amazon KDP originally, and we didn't get much response from it, and it also was a very difficult module to use, with the publishing and everything. So we just looked around. Okay, well, where are people reading comics? Oh, there's this Global Comics website. Oh, there's this Webtoons. Oh, there's this over here. And then you look in and see, well, what kind of comics are on that platform. That was the big one. There's a lot of platforms out there that have a lot of anime, they have a lot of manga, they have, you know, all these type of things. And you're like, okay, well, if that's what people are mostly reading, then let's look here. And we looked at Global Comics, and that had the biggest diversity of stories, art, and creators on that platform. And we were like, all right, well, this seems to be our home, so let's try this out.
And so you submit this work to them. What
Hmm.
was the process? Because you're not the only person who's told me that working with KDP can be a landmine of chaos and confusion, Stephen.
Yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know, how was the process when you finally started talking with them?
It's very streamlined. You don't need to like pick up a hotline and talk to anybody. They have very clear instructions. If you format your stuff in JPEG or PNG files or Adobe files, it's going to convert it over to the site files without you having to do anything. So the process was extremely streamlined, and we
Nice.
went on, set up the whole thing, filled out our bio, did all that kind of fun stuff, and then plugged it in and moved our pages around and set everything how we wanted, and then set a date for publishing and said, go from there. Hey, let's see. And we had a pretty fun launch day. I think we had 300 page reads or something like that on the first day, and almost 20 visitors. So I was like, hey, people are actually reading this. This is good.
Now tell me what that's like. You've poured a lot of yourself into this. You created Philip. You've gotten
Hmm.
to know Philip and the characters around him that make him who he is. You put this on this worldwide platform, and people are starting to pick up on it. What's going through your mind as you're watching other people, peruse and enjoy your work?
Uh, so far, it's been a lot of validation. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I should have been doing this a long time ago. It's like it feels natural. This work is very easy for me. I don't have to think too much about it. I'm like, this just feels like something I should be doing. And so to get just even that small response of people coming out and saying, "Hey, this is actually good. This is different." And I'm like, "Yes, thanks."
Awesome, awesome. No, and I liked on Global Comics where I got to create an account. I was just reading through it that you have different responses you can do, and you can once you log in, you can create a like a wish list and get notified of updates. But I thought it was really cool, easy for me to sit there and read. I didn't have to like work at it very hard.
Hmm.
I just thought it was a cool idea because um I'm gonna tell you, I got kind of turned off at the Boys show on Amazon. I'm like, I don't know what they're trying to do. It's almost like they're trying to go too far the other way for shock value.
Yeah,
And then on the other side of the pendulum, you have the Watchmen, which look, I can't.
yeah.
Mr. Moore, please don't take this the wrong way. I mean, I love those comic books, but it was done for a very different purpose, right?
Yeah,
This like I could relate to it because I'm not Philip and he's not me, but there's parts of his story that I'm like, yeah, I definitely, yeah, Phil, I feel you.
yeah, exactly. You know, and being able to make those kind of characters, it all of my life experiences are able to pour out of this and that's part of what I'm trying to bring to it as well. Like, the ideas behind these characters, they don't just come from nowhere. I've lived through things and experienced things, and I'm like, well, why can't we have these in comic books? Why do comic books always have to be this kind of, I don't want to say trashy art, but like a lower form of art that people don't respect, when the idea of using pictures and telling a story is the most classic thing that humans have ever done. We've done that since cave paintings.
Well, okay, so let me ask it this way: when I was growing up, if you told somebody, especially a female, that you were a comic book fan, it was instant, like turned off.
Yeah.
Now you've got comic books like the whole Marvel series and movies and other stuff. It's like cool to be a comic book fan. But then I wonder, I'm like, are you really a comic book fan? Have you really sat there and
Yeah.
gone to the store and waited for your package to arrive? Or you just go in the movies, pretend like you know what's going on? I don't know. It's kind of diluted now in my way. Am I just being an old crudgy dude or what?
If you are, then I am too. And yeah, it's kind of that, hey man, I put in my work. I went to comic book stores. I bought comic books. I found comic books that were above my age level of reading, and had to beg the comic book guy, like, hey man, I know I'm only 13, but I really want to read the Watchmen. Like, I better not hear from your dad.
What
you
were
know
now? Wait a minute. Now wait a minute, Steven. What was it like reading The Watchmen at age 13?
that blew me out of the water. I was just, and that's part of, you know like you said, you keep bringing up Alan Moore. It's a huge inspiration in my
Really?
artwork, in my
Yeah.
life, because that was the first time I read a comic book and I was like, wait a minute, this is different. Holy crap. Like, you can tell stories like this, you know, and it doesn't always have to be, you know, Superman comes in, saves the day. Haha. Hey, everyone's great. Bye bye, citizens. It's like, whoa, this is different.
Right. And this is the thing, right? I mean, when you think about it, way back, 50,000, 60,000 years ago, we we communicated through drawings on the cave paintings and stuff like that. We told stories with pictures and images.
Hmm.
So I always wonder why, in some regards, comic books and graphic novels aren't treated more seriously. I mean, I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
curious what you think about that.
I think it's just the way that it started, and it's definitely wild how you have these characters coming out, from Marvel, Stanley, and DC Comics and stuff. But again, that goes to the premise behind it of we have to suspend our disbelief to imagine that somebody's gonna dress up in a costume and go out and fight people on the street and then not ask questions about it at all. And the whole joke is like Batman could save Gotham 20 times over if he just actually was the billionaire and invested in Gotham and did infrastructure projects and housing projects and all this other stuff. Instead, he's on the street beating up mentally ill people who, are having a rough go at it. And
And
so,
and and no one ever, Predator drone the Batmobile. No one
yeah,
ever.
puts it together. Yeah.
Right. And it's just and yeah, as a kid, it's great. And one of my favorite characters is Batman. But I see you're coming with. I see you're coming with. So last couple of questions here. A lot of veterans are trying to do something. You get out of the military and you have to either play catch up with your peers or reinvent yourself. I mean, there was
Yep.
no job for, I was a missile operator in the Marine Corps. Weren't many jobs for those guys, right? No real jobs for machine gunners. You got to
Hmm.
reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
And they try pursuing art, whether it's, music or pottery or whatever, and it becomes a grind. It becomes frustrating and they want to
Yeah.
quit. But you've lived this. You're living this now,
Hmm.
by virtue of being published on Global Comics. What would you tell that artist who's in that mental struggle about what their craft is doing for them right now?
It's, you know, lean on your military principles and the training and things that you got in the military, right? Like nothing you did in the military gave you instant gratification. You know, you didn't say, "Hey, man, I want to go to Ranger School, and I want to have a 270 or higher PT score, and wake up the next day and do 10 push-ups or 20 push-ups, and then you're like, oh, I quit." Like it is a grind. It is something that you have to do every single day, and you're not going to get gratification every single day that you do it. You have to do it for the love of the game, and you have to be able to put that end goal in your your front window. Keep it up there. If you're the person that needs to write it down, write it down. If you just have to verbally talk to yourself about it, do that. Whatever you need to do to keep that and be like, keep that mission intent at the forefront, and say, I'm going to move this way, and as long as I'm making an inch that way, I'm doing better every day.
Those inches add up.
Yeah.
Um, you come from a past of it, figuring out you loved art at a very young age and working on it during the military. You have this project out right now, and I'll have the link in the Oscar Mike Radio show post. What's next for you? Are you going to do this Tale of Nihilism in tandem with another project, or is it just focusing on Tales of Nihilism for right now?
Right now, yeah, Tales of Nihilism is supposed to be an anthology. So, working with my co-writer, he's bringing different concepts to the table, and I'm, drawing those out and creating those. Uh, we'll have short stories that we're creating with this that are, you know, uh, kind of off the beaten path and take different ideas, and then we'll jump back into the main story of the anthology, following Philip and other characters as we go along, and we're trying to do it as long as we can, kind of like make, if you will, like a Tales of the Crypt or Mad Magazine. It just keeps going on as far as you can take it.
Awesome. So, I'll have the link in the Oscar Mike Radio show post to Global Comix and your project. Where else can people connect with you, Stephen?
So on Twitter and Instagram, I'm Salty Skipper 708. I have my personal portfolio up there. We also do have a Tales of Nihilism Instagram and Twitter and Facebook page. So we put out all of our kind of like new stuff, like, hey, next week we'll be dropping, this or that. And right now, the first 3 issues on Global Comix are supposed to be free, and then if you like that, there'll be a small price on those going forward.
Nice. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, I love doing Oscar Mike Radio because I get to talk to really interesting people who are doing amazing things as veterans, as people who are active duty service members. And you heard it right here. Regardless of what you're doing, you can learn a lot from Stephen's journey. And hey, I've thoroughly enjoyed Tales of Nihilism, Stephen. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, any closing thought you want to share with us before we shut down?
Yeah, like I said, man, keep that momentum, keep moving forward. If you have experiences, that are deep and meaningful in your life, art's a great way to express them, and keep doing it, because AI is apparently trying to take over the art world, so we got to get out there and get it out.
Oh, you know what? Okay, I'll take a couple minutes. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Because there's some artists I know who are they're really up in arms over this, because
Yeah.
I've seen they showed me some of the AI created art, and I'm like, first of all, I couldn't even think about doing that. But I said, you mean to tell me that a machine did this? They're like, yes. And they're really concerned. Like, they're really worried about their future as artists. I mean, how do you feel about that?
It's sad, but I feel like you can't fight it. I mean, we've had this story since the Industrial Revolution. Think back to John Henry fighting the picket pounder, and with his dying breath, he beat the picket pounder, but industrialization still happened. It still moved forward, and I kind of feel like we're in that moment right now with technology. It's taken our jobs, it's taken, our work, our souls, and it's coming right here. So yeah, my thought is, if you have the ability to create, if you have the ability to process and think great things, put it out there. Just go, because this could be like the twilight years before AI just says, hey, we're taking over.
Well, I mean, I thought about it. There could conceivably be an AI and someone says, okay, I want a superhero with these parameters and these properties.
Yeah.
And the AI just takes over and does it. And I was thinking, I'm like, okay, you could have it set up to where the viewer says, well, I want the character to do this every week. And the viewer gets their own custom story with their own superhero. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But more to follow on that. Well, Stephen, look, man, I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. I like what you're doing. I like the comic book. So there's an open invitation to come back on for future updates. Would definitely like to stay in touch.
Heck
Look,
yeah.
folks, he's Oscar Mike. He is Oscar Mike for certain. And I love it. And as we said, Oscar Mike Radio, our mission in flight. Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, man.
Join us on National Wreaths Across America Day, December 16th, 2023. Each December on National Wreaths Across America Day, our mission to remember, honor, and teach is carried out by coordinating wreath-laying ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery, as well as more than 3,700 additional locations in all 50 states, at sea and abroad. Join us by sponsoring a veteran's wreath at a cemetery near you, volunteering, or donating to a local sponsor group.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action, and the mission is in flight. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 998 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.